It was 1999. I was a much younger guy. I had some hair on my head, can you believe? And I was studying IT at a university in South Africa. And of course, at the time, everything we heard about was this millennium bug. Has everyone heard of the millennium bug?
Yeah.
So this was a fault in IT systems where apparently they haven't been designed to go past the year 1999. Who knew we would survive that long? And so I spent the whole year studying and realizing that this is an event that is going to stop the world. We're going to wake up on the 1st of January 2000 and the electricity will be out. The banking system won't work. The financial system, the medical system, you name it, will not work. So I went to Mauritius, my parents paid me, so that was good. Went to Mauritius, where I'm originally from. And I remember spending New Year's Eve on the beach, and I thought, well, if this is the end of the world, then it's not a bad way to go. Well, I don't have to tell you much about what happened next, because actually it turned out to be not such a big deal. But that's the first time I heard about the end of the world. I've heard a few times more, which I'll go through later, but I wanted to show you the technological revolution of the time. Does anyone know what this is? Well, a PDA. What does that stand for?
Personal digital assistant.
Very good, very good. This was the revolution. Has anyone not seen this? So I'll bring it closer to you. And that's a relic. This is 23 years old today. So this is precious. Actually, I bought this one in 2003. So because I was working then for 2 or 3 years. If you wanted to, I was working at KPMG, and if you wanted to get some favor with the partners, then you had to have one of these, because all the partners had them. But let me tell you about this little piece of technology. So this was a personal digital system. The revolution at the time, I can show it to you, was called a stylus. A stylus. And so you had to do this. It's kind of clumsy now, but this is what you had to do to manage it. Now this one, bought in 2003, was the cheap version, the entry-level version. So this guy didn't have any communication to any kind of network, any kind of technology. You had to plug it into your computer, and then it would synchronize with Outlook and with Windows. So that's how it worked. And then so you plug it in, it synchronizes, then you take it off, and then you pretend like you're working. So that's the technology that we have in 2000. And I guess for those, you're 32, right? I don't think you've seen one of these.
I did.
Oh, you did?
I have a dad that's very tech heavy.
Okay, good. Well, let me show you the memory on this thing. It's astounding. 128 megabytes. And look how big it is. Well, this is the technology we have at the time. And the only reason I show this to you now is, and I've got a few other relics which I'll go through in a moment, but when we talk about the future, you also need to look at the past. And this is very difficult to get in because it's got like 50 teeth that have to line up perfectly, otherwise you bend it and render the device useless. This device, by the way, is useless already, a long time ago.
Yeah, but there was nothing floppies before that, or even worse.
Worse. Let me tell you about the second time I heard that the world was ending. This was in 2001. Now, by this stage, I've been working 9 months. 9 months. And for those who haven't worked in the auditing firms, I can tell you that your first salary is a small salary. It's a meager salary. It doesn't afford you to live, that's for sure. But the carrot that they offer you is if you survive 9 months, you get your first promotion and your first increase. And at the time, I was 21, and I already knew everything about everything. And I was already a qualified financial planner, not really. But I thought it would be a good idea to spend that first increase on a car, a brand new car. And I bought myself a little red Ford Fiesta, because that's what was available at the time. And that day I got delivery of the car was September the 11th, 2001. And I got my car, was very excited, drove to the office, and suddenly I see everyone panicking around screens. Now the internet wasn't very good in South Africa in 2001, and I think globally it crashed, more or less. Kind of a distributed denial of service attack. Because everyone wanted the news, and we weren't as connected as we are now. We didn't have the technology we have now. So the sites were crashing. People were trying to phone each other, that wasn't working. So it was chaos. But I had my new car, so I was kind of like feeling on top of the world. And I got home, and I remember my stepfather saying, "Oh no, you've made a mistake. The world is going to end. You shouldn't have bought a car." So that was the second time. Yeah, well, what technology did we have around then is this little revolution. This is Apple product. Does anyone know what this is? Now they came in various forms, but I wanted to show you this one. This one is the iPod Touch, I think, or Pro, or whatever. But they came out first in 2003, the iPod, and the Classic. And the reason I show this to you is because it still has a disk drive inside. So it's around 250 megabytes, but it's got a drive inside that turns. So this won't last very much longer. It still works today, which is kind of a miracle. I can show it to you, I can prove it. Color screen. This was the next innovation, is a, I don't even know what to call this, but this is how you use this product. You have to turn a little circle, push a button. Crazy, right? It became obsolete subsequently. But that's the iPod. And so today, can you buy an iPod today?
Mm-hmm.
You can still?
We use them in our stores.
You do?
Yes.
That's wonderful.
It's an iPhone without a SIM card.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was not aware of this. I suspect that was a dying business. The other one I wanted to show you, which is really interesting, is this guy. 2007. Does anyone know what this is? No! BlackBerry. No keyboard. BlackBerry had a keyboard. This is an iPhone. 2007. It's an iPhone, can you? I saw it. So I remember when this came out, I was in Chicago, and I was very lucky. As a South African, to be able to travel is phenomenally lucky. So I got a job working at a company. I was an auditor. We had lots of companies throughout the world. So I was in Chicago the night this guy came out. And I was walking down the Golden Mile. Has anyone been to Chicago? So they got a nice road along their lakeshore called the Golden Mile. And I remember the sign, Apple, iPhone. Okay, fine, Apple iPhone. And at the time we had these Nokia devices. That was the coolest device available, more or less, the BlackBerry as well. And so I went into the store, and there was a whole hustle and bustle. So the Apple Store concept was sort of around already, and people were crowding around this thing. So I waited my turn patiently, kind of kicking, and then got to this thing, and I was kind of like, it's doing anything. Like, what is it doing? What was the magic? Was the maps, I think? Like you could get your mail, you could kind of go on the internet, but it didn't do much. So I was like, okay, interesting. I'm glad I was there for the launch, but we'll make a good story one day. But that's about it. But let me ask you a question. Who today has a smartphone? Put up your hand. It's kind of redundant. Who has 2 smartphones? 2, right now, on you. 3. Does anyone have 3? Does anyone have 2 smartphones and a watch that's connected to the internet? Okay. Yeah. So you are the 2 most connected people in the world. You have 1 smartphone. And it's a stupid question to ask who's got a smartphone. But in 2007, yet not many people did. This was a revolution. This was the next way of computing. So it's really interesting to look at this. Now, the next time I heard about the world ending was 2008, 2009. Anyone remember what happened during that time? Yeah, the financial crisis. Financial crisis. The world was going to end. The world the markets crashed 20% in one day. The market went in free fall. Companies were going out of business. People were losing their jobs. That's the year I decided I'll move to the Netherlands. Yeah, kind of risky. But the world had ended a few times, so I see your face. You're like, what? I'm like, well, the world had ended a few times, and I seem to have survived, so I'm going to roll with this. I didn't arrive with much. I didn't have any technology. Actually, funny story, the day I arrived, I didn't have any technology, so I went to the base they say, which I didn't know what the base they say was, and I bought myself a little compact, a little computer, one of these tiny computers. I didn't realize at the time, stupid me, I should have realized, that it comes with a Dutch keyboard. And that the Dutch keyboard is not the same as the South African keyboard that I was accustomed to. So the other thing I didn't realize, also stupid me, is that when you buy a computer in the Netherlands, it comes with native Dutch, which I didn't speak yet. So I spent the first few hours in my room on the Amstel, very lucky that I was on the Amstel for 1 month, trying to figure out this Dutch machine with a Dutch keyboard. It's far more complex than you think because this was 2009. Right, so technology wasn't what we have today. But that's just a small problem. In 2010, so I brought lots of props, next revolution came out. This guy. $499 for the entry level iPad. Did anyone buy this? Clearly I did. So when this came out, I had already been here a year, and I love technology. So when this came out, oh my gosh, I salivate. I wanted one of these, but I couldn't afford it. So I just started here, money's tight, Netherlands is expensive. But this was the next revolution. This was the tablet computer, tablet PC. And people at the time were like, this thing, no one's going to want a device without a keyboard, what a load of nonsense. And here we are. Yeah? This one came out shortly thereafter. The Mini came out, and this is the guy I use today for a lot of my work, actually. Maybe most of my work. Interesting. And then finally, another time when the world was going to end, and this is the last time I promise, but in 2020, Corona happened. And again, the world was going to end. Yeah? The reason I belabor this point a little bit, and I just realized the slides are not here, but is really, if we talk about securing the future, one, we've got to recognize that there is a future, but two, we also have to recognize that as technology comes about, as these big trends come about, people are only but happy to spell doom and gloom. It's going to kill us. You've got corona and pandemics. We've got the climate crisis. We've got potential nuclear warfare. And that's not to mention AI, which is going to get all of us. It's going to take our jobs, it's going to kill us. Yeah? It's a bit hyperbolic, but I think the point is clear, is that these are problems that as humanity we faced many times before. And I'm not suggesting that one of these might not take us out. But I am suggesting that the likelihood is that we'll survive them. And we'll have to actually figure out as societies how to get through this and not just panic. By the way, the reason the world is always ending is because that's what gets clicks. If ever you're looking at your own internet behavior, when you see an article about AI is going to take your jobs, AI is going to kill you, that's what you click on. You don't click on the article that says AI is going to revolutionize medicine and solve and cure cancer. You don't click on that, it's not so interesting. Alright, so I wrote a book, and for any of you who want to write a book, you shouldn't. It's really a lot of hard work, and then you've got to get up in front of audiences and tell them how wonderful your book is. So you shouldn't write a book, but I did. Cybersecurity for non-technical leaders. And I think I wrote this book for all of you and for myself, is as security professionals, we deal with leaders, people who hold the purse, hold the money, and we need to convince them about cybersecurity. And normally, I tell you from my own experience, when I'm talking to people and leadership, often I get the reaction, I'm not technical, I don't understand this, I don't get it. And so I wrote them a book. You don't have to be technical. Here it is. Today I want to talk to you about securing the future. And I have a few other props. For those of you paying attention, I've got a few that I haven't brought up, so I'll bring them up in a while. Keep you guessing. But Darwin said, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, not the most intelligent, it's the most adaptable to change.
Most resilient.
Most resilient, thank you. Probably that's ChatGPT. But let's look back 10 years. Just 10 years, something small. Tesla. 2,600 cars in 2012. Nothing, basically. You can practically make them by hand. But look at that, 10 years later, 1.3 million. What about Instagram, acquired for 1 billion in 2012? Does anyone know how many people were working for Instagram the day they got acquired? 13. 1-3. Ludicrous. When this went through, people were like, this is crazy. This is the worst acquisition ever. Well, today, there we go. 100 billion, and now 1.44 billion in 2022. And then finally, Airbnb. 200 million listings in 2012, today 7 million listings. This just shows you. So when you look at the future, you've got to look back a little bit and go like, wow, this stuff is scary. Who uses all three of these products? Yeah, you use all three. I use all three as well, actually. But that's interesting, right? These things didn't exist at a particular time, and now a lot of people are using them, changing the world. Now, when you think of the future, it's useful to have a framework, and as cybersecurity professionals, we love frameworks. We've got lots of code, ISO 27001, lots of frameworks. When you're thinking of the future, there's also a framework. So I belong to the professional associations of futurists. But they've got a methodology and a way of thinking about the future. And the first is when you think of the future, you have plausible or probable. So in other words, what's likely to happen based on the current trend. If we carry on now with AI, we carry on with the trends that we have, what's the plausible or likely outcome? And then next, you have possible. So everything could happen. So it means we solve climate crisis, we maybe solve a little bit, we don't solve it at all. This is looking at all the possible futures. And then the one we want is preferable, right? As cybersecurity professionals, when you look at AI, robotics, and some of the technologies I'll take you through, what we're all striving for is the preferable solution. Do we need to regulate this? Do we need to protect it in a certain way? Do we need to put limitations on it? Do we need to put a pause on that? Is that even possible? So that gives you a sense. This is how you can think as a futurist. So when you look at yourself today, these are the paths ahead of you. Has anyone heard of the innovator's dilemma? Okay, so this is a book written in 2002. And basically, it is an illustration of what some companies go through. So essentially, success and growth make it difficult for companies to adapt to new technologies, right? So if you're in a market, you are so comfortable in that market that you think, I don't need to look at innovation, I don't need to look at new stuff. The example that always gets shown is Kodak, because Kodak actually were the first to invent the digital camera. But at the time, the resolution was so poor that the execs were like, no ways, this is never going to work, so they didn't invest in it. And someone else came and ate their lunch. So they just focus on the existing products. And then what happens is disruptive innovators come along, normally at the low end of the market or new market segments, and they take the market away from the existing companies. It's happening today with the automotive market. Right now, Tesla is valued at more than all of the other car manufacturers combined. That's scary. That should tell you something. So that's the innovator's dilemma. Why I put this up here is because this applies to companies, but equally you could apply it to yourself. So the question you've got to ask yourself is, what disruption is happening today that I'm not paying attention to? I.e., are you looking at the information that's coming, the new stuff that's happening, and are you paying attention to it? The next concept I wanted to introduce you to was the 6 Ds of digital disruption, and this applies to digital technology. So when a technology is digital, it means you can take it from a physical product and make it into a digital product. So think photographs, music, books, movies, your DNA now. And what happens is it enters this curve where it gets digitized. And in the beginning, it starts off very small, but as it becomes digitized, it actually enters an exponential curve, which means it doubles, right? And the reason for that is because of computing. Moore's law and computing power keeps escalating. In the beginning, it's deceptive. So in the beginning, people are like, oh, what is this digital camera thing? It's 0.3 megapixels. No one's going to want it. And then it goes into a disruptive phase. And that's where you start to see people start to use it. So think of TikTok. In the beginning, it was like, what's this TikTok nonsense? And now everyone's talking about it. Then it gets demonetized. It becomes accessible, affordable to the masses. AI, as an example, ChatGPT, amazing technology. You can be in Africa, in a village, with no electricity. You've got a solar-powered phone, and you have access to ChatGPT. That's where it becomes demonetized. And then, of course, you no longer need the physical products. So I wrote a book. Well, actually, I sell more digital copies than this. So that's the 6 Ds, and again, it's just a framework of thinking about the future. And then finally, it becomes available to everyone. This comes from Peter Diamandis, who's a very positive futurist. He considers that the future is abundant. And so his task is to try and deal with the world's grand challenges. And he's written this book amongst many, which is really good. So if you want the optimist view of the world, this is a good guide to know and to follow. And then finally, and I think this is known by many of you, is Rogers' diffusion of innovations theory. And this just shows that for every technology, people jump on at certain times. So who has an electric car, for example? Yeah, one. Okay, I'm surprised. I have one too, so that's 2. I'm surprised, actually. I thought there would be more. So we are innovators, I guess. And then early adopters come in. Sorry? Who still has a car? Anyhow, but this shows you, with any technology, the curve that you go through. Gartner also has the famous hype cycle.